Wake up, Tenno!
Okay, folks, you asked for it, so I have another build video for you. This one is a little different, so hang tight. First, let's clear some things up about this build, this frame, and what we're going to do. Number 1, her name is Gyre, pronounced Gyre, as in gyro, which is what she's named after because she's a ballerina, and she spins like a gyro. Number 2, been seeing too many new Tenno focusing on big, giant, red crits and nothing else, running meme builds and priming for 30 seconds to deal those negative number crits. And while that's fun, they're generally gimmicky. So with this build, I took everyone's favorite electric ballerina Gyre, and we're going to deal some big damage with some little numbers and dance our way through the steel path enemies. For clarity, that's in comparison. She's still going to hit things for 6 digits now and then. We'll get a whole lot of red crits, all while giving some of the most satisfying sounds the DE's sound department has put in this game. Like, if you don't at least have fun with this build, what are you having fun with in Warframe? No, really, that was an actual question. Tell me in the comments so we can all go try it out, because fun is the whole point of video games. While you're down there, go ahead and hit the like, subscribe, and little ding-a-ling button so you know when the next video comes out. Okay, back on track. Before we dive in too deep, let's take a look at Gyre and her abilities, what we do and do not care about on her. Gyre's passive is the first thing we'll look at. It's extremely simple, yet extremely important to any build on her. Each electrical status on an enemy gives her 10% crit chance against that enemy. As you'll see in a moment, when we combine that with her AoE electric abilities, you can see where we're going. Her first ability is called Arc Sphere. This does roughly the same thing as her signature shotgun, the Alternox does. Launches one of those big Tesla balls that makes your hair stand up straight. It does a big chunk of damage when it hits, and then continually zaps enemies within its radius until its duration runs out. Hitting a chunk of enemies once will increase the damage it does, similar to Mirage's Disco Ball of Doom, but Gyre can have 3 of these out at once, and they don't drain her energy while they're out. Gyre's second ability is called Coil Horizon, and it's kind of a way too bouncy CC ability. Gyre goes bowling, and it knocks down enemies and bounces off things for 2 seconds, then detonates and sucks them all in and ragdolls them. Useful if you can get used to getting it to go where you want, or learning to detonate it where you want by hitting the ability again. For the purposes of this build, these are the 2 abilities that you have a choice between to replace with the Helminth. You can choose either one. Either way, replace the one you don't want with Pillage. Pillage, for those who don't know, is a radial wave that steals shields and gives them back to us, and strips the enemy of armor. In order to fully strip armor, you need 400% strength. There isn't too much to say about this ability. It's pretty much hit the button, watch the enemy health bars turn from yellow to red all around you. Gyre's third ability is Cathode Grace. This will boost Gyre's weapon and ability crit chance by 50% and give her a small amount of energy regen per second. It lasts for 8 seconds by default and gains an extra 3 seconds each time you kill an enemy while it's active. That there allows our third ability to stay up permanently as long as we keep killing things. That leads us to the second half of our engine, Gyre's fourth ability, Rotor Swell. With this ability, not only do you get an aura of electricity around you that does damage ticks over time, but also every time you get a critical hit, electricity will zap from that enemy to nearby enemies within 10 meters and procs a guaranteed electricity effect. By now you should see the engine we're using. Cathode's Grace gives us an additional crit chance. Crits cause electricity explosions and electric status, which if you remember Gyre's passive, our crit chance is increased with the electric proc. On its own, this is a powerful enough engine, but with this build, we want to overclock this. So we want to figure out how to get more electric status procs and amplify that damage. So the more electric procs means higher crit chance means our zaps would do more damage, and the more electricity procs and more crits we get, the more we will absolutely rain electricity down on our enemies. We're going to couple that up with the augment for her third ability called Cathode Current, which will release an additional discharge from Rotor Swell with 200% more damage and extend the duration of Rotor Swell when we kill someone with her third ability active, which as long as we keep killing things, will be always. See the big giant circle of damage? One might say like a gyro? Too far? Yeah, probably, but let's see how we're going to do this. To start with, we're going to pause a moment for 2 precursory warnings. This build, rather this frame entirely, is a late game frame. And if you have not completed the new war, which is a precursor to the area she drops in, then there will be some spoilers right up front, and you can skip to the section labeled Archon Shards in the timestamps. The Archon Shards are the second warning. You will need access to purple Archon Shards for this build to reach its potential. With that out of the way, we're going to first look at our operator setup. We're going to run either Zenric or Matarai for this because we want the strength buff. I prefer Matarai for most things as it boosts my operator damage output, and if realistically when I mess something up and go down, it makes popping back with Last Grasp easier. If you don't have Last Grasp unlocked to a Waybound, then honestly which Matarai or Zenric you use is even less important. Zenric will give you a little bit more energy when you need it, Matarai will help you kill Thrax and get back up with Last Grasp. Your choice. For the operator arcanes, nothing specifically for this build, just the general stuff I run on my operator. I use Magus Repair for a quick heal if I need it, and as you can see I still have Magus Aggress in my flex spot because of Korra, which if you haven't checked out that video, I'll pop a card up here in the corner right now. Amp Arcanes, all that normal stuff. If you're curious, mine is a 147 amp because I find that easiest to wreck Thrax and get back up with Last Grasp with. Seeing a pattern here, Eternal Onslaught and Eradicate are of course the standards for the amp damage meta. Okay, enough of that. Back on Gyre, we're going to start out looking at her Archon Shards. I'm running 5 purple for ability damage on things affected by electricity. If I need to explain why, then you clearly skipped the first part of this video and you should go back and watch it. Obviously, if you have Tau ones, that's better, but whether or not these are Tau is just some additional damage and makes your life easier, but it isn't going to make or break the build overall. But Merch, I don't have that many purple shards. It's okay, Tenno. Red ones set to ability strength will work, just not quite as much damage from my testing. But you would be able to swap some other mods around, so it's very possible I missed some great combo. Regardless, you will want to have as many purple shards as you can fit in here, because those are what's going to be boosting the damage of our ability procs from our Cathode Grace Rotor Swell combo and keep the endless chain going. Next, we're going to look at Gyre herself. First up, we're going to use Corrosive Projection as our aura. This will lower the requirement to full strip enemies using Pillage from 400% strength down to 328%, which we will achieve by using Blind Rage, Transient Fortitude, and Power Drift to get to 269% strength, plus Molt Augmented, which at full stacks will put us at 329% strength. Yes, that means there isn't a Prime Sure-Footed in this build, because I don't have one. Realistically, chances are neither do you. And yes, that means our first bit in a mission we won't be fully armor stripping until we hit the 250 kill mark. But thankfully, due to the new armor mechanics introduced with Jade Shadows, that won't be a big deal. Reality is, you could swap out some strength for additional defense or something in this build, like swapping Molt Augmented for a more defensive arcane, but I wanted as much strength in here as possible to keep the electricity hitting as hard as I could. If you have Prime Sure-Footed, you can of course opt to run that instead of Power Drift and either just not fully armor strip, or swap one of the purple shards for a Tau Red shard with the plus 15 strength option. I know, so many choices in this build. Still talking about strength and Prime Sure-Footed, you could also choose to swap in Umbral Intensify, but I opted for the 90% strength to gain to our Rotor Swell, which is the ability that's doing all the damage anyhow. Next we want some energy. So we're using Prime Flow and Arcane Energize, which you surely just got from the clan event, or bought one off someone else while the market on them is in the gutter. Next, we want some range, because the more range we have, the further Rotor Swell and its discharges will reach and spread. So we're going to run Reach and Archon Stretch. If you don't have Archon Stretch, regular Stretch will work, but the Archon version is going to give us some additional energy regen, so there's no reason we shouldn't use it if we can. Our 2 final mod slots are going to be filled with Cathode Current, which we discussed earlier, that will give us additional big electric shocks, and our 1 defensive mod, Rolling Guard. What the Merch? Only 1 defensive mod? Well, hold on. Only 1 defensive mod on our frame itself, which is why we're going to look at our companion, Diriga, next. On this little dude, we have Guardian, Shield Charger, and Meta Ray to help keep Gyre dancing around. These 3 mods will let the Dirija buff our shields and function as a makeshift shield gate. And we use Rolling Guard on our frame for something that messes up and we need that 3 seconds of invulnerability while Diriga gets its head on straight. And the main purpose of using Diriga is what we're going to put in his first slot, because remember, companions use their precepts in order when possible, so order does matter here. We're going to put Arc Coil in. This lets our Diriga zap everything within 10 meters with electricity, but it only has a 10% status chance, which, yes, that sucks. So, we're going to add Manifold Bond, which will force proc elements for our companion's weapon onto all the enemies hit by Arc Coil. And we're going to make sure our companion weapon has electricity on it. As usual, the rest of our spots are filled with things to keep the Diriga alive as much as possible, like Enhanced Vitality and Prime Regen, or of course, Standard Regen if you don't have Prime, or Quality of Life mods such as Animal Instinct and Vacuum. Last slot on Diriga will be filled with Calculated Shot, which I opted for over Assault mode due to the range advantage, allowing him to shoot things if there is nothing near, and then be able to use Arc Coil by the time I get near the enemies. Before anyone asks, my Enhanced Vitality is only at rank 8 because it's also on my Worm, who needs an additional Forma before I can rank it up to mod 10. If you can make yours 10, by all means do so. So we have Manifold Bond and Arc Coil equipped. We're going to then put the elements we care about on our companion's weapon, which in this case is the Hellstrom. We're going to put Electricity and Viral on here because Electricity procs will increase our crit chance due to Gyre's passive, and Viral will amplify our damage. How specifically you get the mods on here isn't really important, because the elements themselves will be forced onto the enemies via Arc Coil and not the weapon. I went ahead and used the Hellstrom and modded for status and fire rate on here so he could continue to affect things with his Calculated Shot precept. As is the method with this whole build, the more often we can get electricity and viral on things, the better. My Riven here is just base damage and fire rate. Literally any fire rate mod such as Shred, Prime Shred, Vile Acceleration, etc. will work in its place. So next we'll go over the weapons. Your primary is going to be for taking down bosses, whether that's Acolytes, Demolishers, Corrupted Vor, it doesn't matter. It's for handling the things that aren't just melted by your electricity. To that end, I'm not going to go over all the hundreds of options you have here. Most meta weapons, pretty much anything with cold on it, you have a lot of options. At the moment I've been playing with Glaxion Vandal, modded for cold and corrosive. Here's the build for that, and this handles any of the Acolytes that don't just get lit up like Chevy Chase and Christmas Vacation by my Rotor Swell. There are better options. This is just what I've been using because I like the Glaxion, and I didn't have a Cold Progenitor Tenet version. Again, so many options in this build. We'll bypass our secondary for a moment and jump to our melee, the Praetos, which is just kind of a standard utility weapon for frames that want to move fast, which is definitely Gyre. Here's the build for it, but honestly, you can leave it completely empty if you want. This is only here due to the Incarnate evolutions at evolutions 2 and 4, which give us 20% sprint, 20% slide, and 30% parkour speed. Couple that with the Amalgam Serration giving sprint speed from my primary, and Gyre's flying around pretty quick. So now back to our secondary. When you want to spread status really fast to a lot of things, you use either the Epitaph or the Nucor. And the Epitaph has a further range and can hit more things at once, meaning more electricity zaps from Rotor Swell, so we're going to use that. We're using Galvanized Diffusion here because we will actually be occasionally killing things with this Epitaph, simply due to the sheer number of damage numbers flying around, and it will sometimes get the killing blow. We're running Pistol Pestilence and Frostbite to give us the status boost and viral. And then we're going to use Jolt and Convulsion, or Prime Convulsion, to weight our procs so that we have a higher chance to proc electricity than viral, so that we ensure we will get our crit chance up quick. Sure Shot gives us additional status chance. Lethal Torrent adds more plus some more fire rate. Epitaph fires projectiles, so we need lethal momentum to speed those along and worry less about lead times. Fulmination or Primed Fulmination will make our radial explosion of electricity go further, allowing us to proc electricity, viral, blast, and the hidden cold proc on every explosion. Yes, if you didn't already know, the Epitaph has a guaranteed unlisted cold proc on its radial attacks. This is great for us, however, as cold procs now increase our crit damage. Obviously, we're running Conjunction Voltage here because we're proccing electricity all over the place, and that's going to let us proc electricity even better. Okay, so now we've got the prelude done, we're on to the first movement of this electric ballet. When you first come into the mission, you're going to drop an energy pad because we don't want to be scrambling for energy. From there, we're going to move towards the first group of enemies we can find, and we're going to use our operator ability for strength, either Hardened Wellspring or Slinging twice, then cast our Rotor Swell, then our Cathode's Grace, and then use Pillage to regain any shields we lost during our little dance and strip what armor we can from the surrounding enemies. We'll immediately get some distance and start firing our Epitaph to proc electricity and viral, increasing our crit chance and damage against them. They'll melt, and you'll see you've gained total time on your Rotor Swell and Cathode's Grace thanks to Cathode's Current. From here, we just move from group to group and fire our Epitaph at them to trigger lots and lots of small but strong numbers. Again, similar to a ballet dancer. It's almost like DE planned all this. As you can see, speed is important and we need to be moving from group to group. Not that big of an issue, things with heavy enemy density. Less dense missions may require you to start the process over again at various points. And that's why we ran Flow to give ourselves a chunky energy pool. Real quick, you should see your numbers climb from Molt Augmented and be able to fully strip enemies, including Acolytes. When those show up, just pay attention to who it is to see if you need to stay close or keep your distance. The main one you need to keep your distance with is Violence, as he'll cause you serious issues by shutting down your combo engine. Everyone else you can generally run circles around and let your electricity kill them. I have my Glaxion on Cold and Corrosive to slow and damage any Acolyte I need space from. Watch out you don't get slapped with the magnetized debuff from Malice where you damage yourself on every shot, as you will cause yourself a lot of issues if you fire off a bunch of Epitaph rounds into yourself. And there you have it. A lot of explanation for what turns into run around and fire your Epitaph and watch things get disintegrated. If you try out this build, found some way to improve it, let us all know in the comments. Go ahead and hit the like and subscribe buttons on your way down there so you can come check out my next video. In the meantime, you should check out some of my other Warframe builds and how-tos. As always, happy hunting, Tenno.